Welcome to Fear Street.
Hello there. Did you miss me? Welcome to Fear Street. I'm Jack, and I'll be your host for the evening. Have you or a loved one ever suspected your spouse of being a demon? Fear not. You're not alone. Simply call 1-800-I-HATE-MY-SPOUSE. That's 1-800-I-HATE-MY-SPOUSE. The folks over at Spouse Haters Anonymous are trained professionals, and they'll be more than happy to help you out. Or you can listen to tonight's story as an alternative. Sticking around? Great. Turn out the lights. Lock the doors. You're about to enter Fear Street, where nightmares come alive.
If you were to ask the average person whether or not they believe in the paranormal, ghosts, spirits, demons, UFOs, and cryptids, they'd probably laugh right in your face. You see, it's hard to believe in what you've never seen, unless you really want to. Like heaven, for instance. How many people believe in heaven? Have they ever seen it? Exactly. I find that in general, people believe in the paranormal only when it suits them. But hey, I get it. Hell, sometimes I wish I could be the same way. That I could unsee some of the things I've seen, get rid of the nightmares, and have normal dreams at night. You know, like normal people, flying or whatever. Don't get me wrong, I love what I do, I'm getting ahead of myself. My name's Sam Crawford. Paranormal is my business. You could say I'm kind of like a detective for the unexplained. When something goes awry that defies logical explanation, that's where I come in. I've been doing it for over a decade now, and in that time I've seen things I still don't believe. Things that would make any sane person run and hide. But I guess I've never really been that sane. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with my dad. See, I never met him. He disappeared shortly after I was born and was never seen again. He was on his way home from work one night, but he never made it. The cops got involved, but they weren't much help. By chance, one day my mom happened to stumble across a private detective who took a particular interest in my dad's case. He told her that this wasn't the first time he'd heard of a case like this. Apparently, several men had disappeared from the area over several months, never to be seen again. All late at night, all on their way home from work, and all on the same highway my dad had been driving on. He took the case, and then things got weird. He'd camp out along that highway all night, day after day. At first he didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Then one night, he saw something. It was a quiet night in the spring, not unusual for our fairly small town. He was staking out that highway and something caught his eye. About half a mile away, 300 or so feet in the sky, a light began to shine. It grew brighter and brighter until some sort of portal opened up. Out of this portal came some sort of craft, but he couldn't see it. It was all black, with no lights, almost like a shadow, and circular. He couldn't believe his eyes. As soon as that happened, the quote-unquote portal blinked out of existence, and the craft disappeared. He said this all happened in no more than 10 seconds. Sure enough, Jimmy Gardner turned up missing that very night. Mom didn't necessarily believe it fully, but she didn't have anything else to go on. He told her that he had planned to go back the next night, but this time, he'd have his camera ready. And that was the last my mom ever saw of him. She asked around, but almost no one had ever heard of him. Just like all the others that had disappeared, there was no trace of him or his car to be found anywhere. It was as if he'd fallen off the face of the earth. After that, my mom was never the same again. I was too young to remember, but folks around town say that she shut down, closed off to the world, and became a shell of her former self. That was the mother I always knew. She used to always brush me aside when I asked about my dad, but when I turned 13, I demanded to know what happened. Tears started streaming down her face, and she sobbed uncontrollably. It was the first time I can remember seeing my mother really cry. It felt like someone had put a dagger in my heart. At that exact moment, I promised myself I'd never let her be hurt like that again. I began researching UFOs. That opened up Pandora's box. I learned everything I could about UFOs, extraterrestrials, and began researching all the unexplained disappearances I could find. That led to me becoming informed about pretty much every paranormal topic under the sun. And after 5 years, I was pretty well versed in all things unexplained, and had developed some theories of my own regarding what had happened to all those missing people. But I kept those to myself. Little did I know, when I was 18, I'd finally get to experience the paranormal firsthand. Shelley, who happened to be a neighbor of mine, was experiencing some paranormal activity. Nobody believed her, except me. Luckily, I was able to help her out. During the process, we also fell in love and ended up getting married. She's my angel, the one thing that keeps my feet on the ground. Anyway, I've been doing it ever since. I'm someone people can call when they're out of options. Like I said, I've been at it over 10 years now, and there isn't a single person who's needed it that I haven't been able to help in one way or another. Until 2 weeks back. Shelley and I had gone on a trip to Peru to explore some of the ancient caves that were dated back to the Incas, and some even before. After the first day, Shelley started feeling under the weather, which was odd enough considering it's the middle of summer. She was running a hell of a fever, so I was taking care of her. I noticed that she became snappy, which isn't like her at all. But it wasn't just that. She became distant, cold. If you knew Shelley, you'd know that's pretty much the polar opposite of her personality. It caught me off guard, but I chalked it up to her not feeling well. Needless to say, our last few days there didn't feel like much of a vacation, and we ended up leaving early. We got home on a Friday night, and I was just looking forward to a good night's sleep for the first time in a week. I usually sleep straight through the night, but I woke up in the middle of the night and looked at my clock. It was exactly 1:11 a.m. I rolled over slowly. Shelley was staring right at me. Her eyes were completely blank, like she was in a trance. My heart skipped a beat. Shelley, you scared the shit out of me. What are you doing? Shelley. Shelley. I shook her and she finally snapped out of it. Babe, what the hell were you doing? She had no idea what I was talking about. Eventually I fell back asleep. I didn't think too much of what had happened. I just figured maybe she'd been sleeping with her eyes wide open. Over the next few days, Shelley grew increasingly cold and distant. She was hardly eating and started to look gaunt. I'd come home and find her sitting in a room with the lights off. When I'd greet her, she'd just stare at me blank-faced. I could literally feel a distance growing between us. It was tangible. I was completely caught off guard, and I just couldn't understand why she had changed so drastically from one moment to the next. So I sat her down to talk things out. She stared off into the distance with that same trance look she always seemed to have these days. I told her how I'd been feeling. How, ever since our trip, she'd been pushing me away. I don't know what you're going through, but whatever it is, I'll help you. I'm here for you, Shelley. I love you. She slowly turned to face me.
I love you too.
Her voice sounded strange, distorted. She erupted into a sinister laugh that sent chills down my spine, then resumed staring off into space. I now had a pretty good idea of what was wrong with her, but I needed to be sure. I booked a flight back to Peru and met with a shaman there. I told him what had happened, and he confirmed what I already knew. Something had gotten into her. It had been waiting in those caves. My Shelley was possessed. Due to the nature of my work, I was aware of how to handle these sorts of things. When I got back home, Shelley seemed even worse. Her skin was pale, her hair unbrushed. And when I looked into her eyes, which was hard because she was always looking down, she just wasn't there. The house was a pigsty. There were 3-day-old dirty dishes in the kitchen, and it smelled absolutely putrid. I spent the day cleaning, and when it was time for bed, kissed Shelley on her cold cheek and waited. When she was asleep, I grabbed the syringe I'd put under my pillow earlier and injected her with propofol, a sleeping drug. She woke up instantly and rolled over, facing me, a murderous look in her eye. But then, she fell unconscious. I tied her hands and feet securely to the bed, then said a prayer for me and for Shelley. I started the exorcism to get that thing out of her, and her body started writhing around in agony. She woke back up immediately and started screaming this inhuman scream. I continued with the exorcism. She was screaming the most horrible obscenities to me. I won't repeat them. Then it seemed like she was getting weaker. Her voice sounded like her own now, and she pleaded with me. "Baby, what are you doing to me? Please, stop." There were tears in her eyes. "Shelley?" I ran over to her and began untying her. "Baby, I'm sorry." I hugged her. She hugged me back with her now free left arm. Her embrace was tight. "Babe, that's too tight. You're hurting me." Her arm wrapped around my neck, cutting off my airway completely. Everything was fading around me. I inched her arm up, barely able to move it, desperately trying to free myself. She screamed as I bit her as hard as I could. Her grip loosened for a moment and I escaped, scooting myself across the room. I continued the exorcism. Again, Shelley began to scream and gnash her teeth, writhing around in agony. I finished. Shelley lay still, eyes closed. I inched closer to her. "Shelley? Shelley!" She wasn't breathing. No! 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 I put my hands on her chest and started pumping, performing CPR. 20 thrusts, then 2 breaths, and checked her pulse. Nothing. "Don't you fucking die on me, Shelley!" I placed my hands on her chest again, thrusting 20 times. Tears streaming at this point. No pulse. Fuck! I tried again, and again. "Shelley?" Her eyes opened slightly. I hugged her tightly. Her eyes closed again. Breath drifting in and out, slowly. It was over. Over the next few days, Shelley got better. And it hasn't been easy on either of us. But I hope with time, we can get back to the way things used to be.